If it's a bad day or an uninspired day, then it's time to put it down and go do something else fun. Watch a movie or go for a walk or go for a drive or go out to eat or something like that.
Welcome to Peak Pyrography, the wood burning podcast, where we discuss artistry and process with creators in the wood burning and pyrography community. I'm your host, Justine Fedde. I was introduced to wood burning in 2020, and I haven't put down my burner since. If you've been enjoying the podcast, make sure to like, subscribe, do all the things that helps to support me, helps the podcast to grow, or share it with your friends and tell them what you're enjoying about it. I would really appreciate any kind of support you can give me in that way. And if you've got any ideas or you want to hear from a guest or you've got questions for specific guests, reach out to me, DM me on Instagram, leave it down in the comments, whatever, here on YouTube, whatever. I'd love to hear from you. And every week I've been giving you a creative spark to help with your creativity if you're feeling down and low or you're just kind of in a rut. This week, the word is circus from Bo Barnes on Instagram. Share your design based on this word using the hashtag #PeakPyroSpark, and I can't wait to see what you create with it. If you've got other ideas, again, reach out to me, DMs. I love to hear from you. Anytime you've got anything to share, I'd love to hear from it. Now for today's episode. Today's guest is Joe Greening, and he is a filmmaker. So that's a little bit different than our usual pyrographer and our usual wood burning artist. But I asked him to come on the podcast because I think there's something really fascinating and really special about learning about the creativity and the process that other creatives have and figuring out how we can apply that to our art. I've known Joe for a while now. He's worked with my husband for a couple of years, and it was just so much fun to sit down and geek out with him about creativity and what he likes to do. Joe's been working on a short film called I Want You, and I got to sit in on an early screening of an early draft a couple weeks ago, and that was really fun. It will hopefully be releasing in the next couple of months, at the latest maybe next year. But I hope you really enjoy this episode. Let me know what your favorite takeaways are in the comments. Hi, Joe. Welcome to Peak Pyrography.
Thanks, Justine. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you on, especially because you're a creative a visual creative with a different kind of creativity or a different kind of medium than our usual wood burning medium.
I am not a pyrographer. Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. You're good. No, but you are a filmmaker.
Yes.
And you've been doing that for a while now.
You could say that, yeah. You could say you could go all the way back to second grade if you wanted, but I guess that wasn't professional.
I mean, the creative journey starts right away, right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So second grade, what were you doing?
Well, my family just got a brand new video camera. So
is this camcorder? Like
yeah, it was a camcorder, yeah. And so I would talk to my buddy Joey, and I was like, hey, we need to make a movie. And I got a graveyard that's 3 blocks away from my house. Let's make Ghosts in the Graveyard the movie. And it was me, him, and my dad filmed it, and my little sister was the ghost. And she was in kindergarten, so she forgot her lines almost every single shot. There's so many shots of her just like shrugging her shoulders when the camera gets to her, and we had to cut and then tell her the lines, and then you can see it rolls again. There's no editing. It's just one straight story.
And you still have that and
reference
back to it regularly?
Yeah, it's on my reel.
Perfect. So was that, you were the writer for that?
I would say that maybe there wasn't really much writing. It was kind of us just like playing make-believe with a video camera in front of us. But yeah, I was acting in it and coming up with the story with my buddy Joey, and yeah.
And so then from second grade, from Ghost in the Graveyard, where did it go and grow?
Well, I just kept making movies with my friends over the summers, and like it kind of just became more of a hobby, and then it was more of a passion. And I went to the high school I went to partially because they actually offered video production classes. Not a lot, but like more than the school in my town would have offered. And then pretty early on, I knew I wanted to go to like college for it and pursue it professionally. So it just kept growing from there as like a passion to something that I looked at seriously as a career.
And continuing to come up with your ideas and come up with to write the stories that you were making films for?
Yeah, definitely. I did a lot of writing, yeah, like more in high school and stuff, and then in college I kind of shifted to more of like a cinematography
Okay, so
kind
what's
of.
the difference
Oh,
between?
yes. Um, uh, so like directing would be writing and directing. You're writing the story and then directing the actors. You're kind of the I guess you could call it like the boss on set. But you're mostly working with the actors, and then you have a crew that's doing all the lighting and filming and cinematography, which is basically the cinematographer is in charge of everything that you see on camera. So the lighting, the composition of the image, and where things are placed on screen.
So without sounding too, I'm not trying to say this the wrong way, but it's more of the background or the visuals than the what's happening.
Yes, yes, and it kind of can get interfused together because
Sure.
the pre-production process is super collaborative between the cinematographer and the director. The director has a vision, the cinematographer has a style, and usually you can collaborate in a really cool way that blends those both together. Yeah.
So I'm assuming that means you're building some good community with people as you're hopefully on each project. And
Definitely, definitely. I have a really close knit group of friends that are filmmakers that we're always on each other's sets and shooting stuff for each other. Sometimes somebody's directing, sometimes somebody's shooting, and we're all just helping out on each other's sets. And it's a really cool cycle of a cycle of inspiration, if you'd call it that.
sure,
Yeah.
because you get to see what they're doing,
Yeah.
and then you're like, oh, you did that.
Yeah. I could
Cool.
do something like that, or I have an idea too. You guys can help me out on my set, and it just keeps going. It's really awesome. Yeah.
That is fun, and I mean, we talk about it all the time how important the community is to supporting each other's creative journeys.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So you were you high school and then you went to college
Hmm.
and were focused more on cinematography.
Yeah.
It's been a couple of years since college, so what are you working on these days? Kind of how's that journey morphed since then?
Yeah, I've had a couple of different jobs since college, doing some commercial videography and wedding videography, and learning a lot of like how to work with light. It was so cool working in the wedding industry because I got to work with so many different photographers and videographers that used natural light in such a cool, unique way that I'd never really played with before. So I
Because
learned a
you'd
lot.
always in school and stuff you had always been focused on, the
Yeah, yeah, the studio lighting and everything like that. And there was stuff where we were doing outside lighting, but just working with people that see it in it's like a slightly different way,
sure.
especially with photography. Photographers look at lighting and natural light, especially in such a unique and different way than I had been used to. So, yeah, I learned a lot through that job, and then moved down to Colorado Springs. So I went to school up in Moorhead, Minnesota, and then that first job was in Bismarck, North Dakota. Moved down to Colorado to be closer to some family. Um, and then eventually got a job working at a production company down in here. So that's my full time job is commercials and documentary and that kind of work right
And
now.
then on the side you do your own projects.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I do some freelance
That's
stuff.
amazing.
Yeah, it's like the stuff to pay the bills is still stuff that I'm super passionate about, which is really fun. And then yeah, the passion projects happen kind of in an extracurricular kind of way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so with those passion projects, those some of those like you have a project coming out sometime here that you just recently filmed.
Yes. And that was one. So, like, I've been doing a lot of cinematography since school, and this was my first kind of big jump back towards writing and directing, which is something I hadn't done in a really long time. And it was really, really fun to get back into those shoes and work with actors again.
So
Because
what does that process look like to get into those shoes, the writer director mindset and
it's more of like just coming up with the story, because usually as a cinematographer, a director of photography, one and the same, you get approached by a director, or you're collaborating with a director that has a story written, and maybe they've got some cast members already, and they just want you to approach it from a visual standpoint. But when you're writing and directing, you're starting at level zero, and you're coming up with the story and writing the script, and then casting the actors, and finding locations, finding your own cinematographer, and kind of going from there.
and where do those ideas come from when you're writing?
For me, I tend to write a lot of horror. So
Okay.
it's scary, spooky stuff that I
I
like to
don't know that
write.
I could watch any of your stuff then.
That's fair. That a lot of my family members feel the same way. They're like, "When are you gonna make something fun and happy?" I'm like, "Well, those were the wedding videos."
Hopefully.
Yeah, right.
Hopefully you weren't
Exactly.
making horror wedding videos.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I've watched horror since college when
Really?
dressed up my boyfriend and made him jump out of the closet right before we watched the
Uh-huh.
the horror videos.
Yeah.
And and then we were all spooked to begin with.
It's a very specific type of thrill, right? Like when you're watching a horror movie, it's like a you get that like you're on a roller coaster kind of, and but then it's sometimes a little bit spookier after the fact when you're all alone and you're thinking about things. So
And
I definitely
you
get
don't
that.
get spooked out by your own like
Not my own
imaginings?
thoughts, not usually. Sometimes it's usually stuff that like feels real, like I'm looking at like an article or something like some old like folklore or uh what's the word for it? Like where you look in the mirror and say Bloody Mary 3 times
Oh,
and
sure,
then she'll
like
appear in the
ghost
mirror.
stories.
Yeah, exactly. Those stuff like that would really freak me out, like especially in high school. I feel pretty desensitized to it now. Like in the moment I can get my adrenaline up and get scared of things, but usually usually I'm pretty good at falling asleep at night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I Want You is the project you're working on right now,
Yes,
and
that's the
where
title.
did that one specifically come from?
That one was so I've always when I was in school, I always tried to write stuff that I was like a fan of. Like when I was still writing and directing in film school, like I'm a huge fan of the Twilight Zone. So I basically did a rip-off of the Twilight Zone and just kind of tried to come up with my own like kind of unique story, but it's pretty much the same. And so I really wanted to approach this one of writing something that I hadn't really seen before and something that I was familiar with. So the idea kind of was that I work at a or a film studio, so we have access to this huge, cool stage and like a green room and everything like that. And I make movies, so I tried to write the story of someone that was in that industry.
Sure.
Yeah, so
Write what you know.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's about an actor that's at a certain place in his career, but wishes that he was way higher up in level. He's doing like motion capture for a terrible movie, and he meets the most famous actress in the world, and she invites him over to her place. I'm trying to avoid spoilers, but
Yeah, yeah.
then uh, and he has no idea why. But it's kind of that struggle of they both want something from each other, but neither of them really understands what that is. And it's everyone I think in the industry of filmmaking especially can relate to like you can feel like you're doing something really cool and really awesome, but there's also a million other people that are doing something really awesome too. And there's always that next level up where you're
Right.
not
I
quite
mean,
there.
we talk about that all the time, like the comparison bug, and when that sneaks in, and you're like, oh, but also what I'm doing is pretty cool.
Exactly, exactly, and it's kind of recognizing that, and that was kind of the inspiration for it of feeling like you're in one position and wanting to kind of climb the ladder, and what would you do to climb that ladder?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and seeing someone else in a different position who wants what you have.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, we talked a little bit about where the idea came from, and your process then was you wrote this, but come having an idea and writing it, that sounds really simple, and I'm sure that it's a little bit more than that.
Yeah, I think so. I also have this problem where every once in a while I'll be like, I'm going to write something. I haven't written anything in a long time, but I'll just try it. And I get about 5 pages in, and then I get in this cycle of rereading it, and I'm like, oh, that's not quite right. That's not really how I wanted it. I want to say something different, and I never finish it.
Sure.
So with this one, I started the script like months and months before ever finishing it, but I started with the ending. And
Okay.
I started with like the last half of the script and worked my way to the ending. And then once I had the ending, showed it to the guy I wanted to be the lead, and he was interested in it. And he was like, "Well, it needs to be fleshed out, right?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, there's a whole beginning thing that I want to add to it." So then once I had some interest and the ending, it was a lot easier for me to go back to the beginning and start and go towards the middle.
That's a interesting way to do it. Was it easier to do it that way?
For me, yes. I think that the problem was I've had ideas in the past where it's a really cool idea, but I don't know really. I'm not. I think that the writer Stephen King can just like he's famous for being able to sit down and like I don't know how this story's going to end, and he just starts writing it, and it'll be like a roller coaster for him, just like the reader, and he'll finish it. But I don't think that many people can do that. I think it was a good lesson to like always have, from now on, I'll always have an outline of how I want the beginning, middle, and end to be, because I haven't really had that before. but this one I had the ending already, so it was easier, and I'll probably do that from now on. Yeah.
So did you have any like classes or courses or anything that helped you with your writing style, or is that all self-learned?
That's all self-learned. That there were, I think, a few like script writing. I'll take that back. I had one script writing class, but it was online and it was not really like super engaged. So, and there was like minimal amounts of feedback in that class. I also probably didn't take it as seriously as I could have gotten more out of it.
Well, because at that time you were going to be a cinematographer and not a writer.
Right,
So
exactly. It was still a fun thing to like get some ideas out, but yeah, I wasn't putting as much effort into it as I should have been to really could have been, yes. So not particular. Most of the stuff that I'm learning now, it's the hardest part I think right now for me is writing dialogue because it's really hard to write something and make it feel natural for
Yes.
people to
Yes,
speak
it
out
is.
loud. Yes, yes.
I
So
feel that every time I read off the teleprompter.
right, exactly. You're reading
Yeah.
it and you're like, oh, this a human wouldn't sound this way, right?
Yep.
But that one, it was for this script. I mean, I sent it to a lot of really talented writer friends that I have, and they were excellent about giving feedback about the dialogue in specific. So that was
It
super
didn't
helpful.
tear you apart too hard.
No, actually, one of my friends, Lyndon Stave, actually is getting a co-writer credit because he had so much feedback, especially in the dialogue, that just elevated the whole story. I thought so. I thought he deserved to have that co-writing credit.
Yeah, and you're in a community. Filmmaking is a community that is very good about giving credit to
Yeah,
and acknowledging each other.
I think so. Yeah, and I always stay for the credits,
Yeah.
just to point out and be like, I don't know you, but nice job. You know.
I see your name scrolling
Yeah,
there.
exactly. And it's so cool because yeah, it is the most collaborative art form, I think. You can sit there and you're watching 5 minutes of names roll by for this 90-minute show that you just saw on
Yeah.
the screen. It's pretty incredible and really, really cool.
And for yours, that's going to be 10 minutes. It's still going to be a minute of credits,
Right,
right?
exactly. There's several, there's tens of people that worked on it, like at least 30,
Yeah.
and more in just the thanks for, providing a vehicle or a location or something
Sure.
like that. So that's all part of the collaboration as well.
Yeah. I mean, you can't, community over competition and just community in general, you can't really beat that.
Yeah. Well, that's what's so cool about this podcast is getting all these voices together that, it's such a big community, but there, as far as I know, not really a huge like pyrography podcast out there, right?
Nope.
Yeah.
When I started it, I could not find, I found one other one that had one episode. So, we're here a couple 15, 20 episodes in and yeah, it's a lot of fun to create this for sure.
And getting that community together.
And
right?
bringing the
Yeah.
community together and giving people a place to share their stories and to hear their stories. And yeah, it's all about the community.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we just have the facility here to make it happen.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
So some of your stuff you write yourself, and some of your stuff you're doing with other people. What is kind of how do you decide which ones to do?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that like when I'm asked by someone, usually at this point it's like a friend. It's pretty few and far between at this point. It's starting to be a little bit more people that I don't really know reaching out.
Like, hey Joe, I love your work.
Yeah, exactly. Most of the time, I've worked with Steve Warkle, Nick Beaver, Derek Bauer. Like we're all buddies, and we've worked on each other's sets over and over and again. And like I'll
Sure.
pretty much shoot anything for those guys. So, and then there's also incredible talented people that I'm meeting. I've done a project with a filmmaker named Simeon Gregory that we filmed a couple years ago up in Washington State, and that was just kind of that situation where he was looking for a cinematographer, I was looking for some work, and we connected and made a really cool project together. I think it's mostly about the story, and if it's not my story and I didn't write it, it would be about like the connection to it. If they seem like they're really committed, it's more about the passion of it. There's some people that they don't really know what they're doing, or they have this idea but not really sure how to get there and stuff like that. So I think it's more about like the wanting to do it and having the drive to actually get it done, and then having a cool story on top of it is like the icing on top.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
It's a good way to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
When you're creating stuff, when you're writing or when you're doing the cinematography, I'm guessing when you're doing the cinematography, there's not a whole lot in the background, but if you're writing or if you're kind of working solo on something, what's happening in the background for you?
Like in the background.
Is there music playing? Is there a
Yes.
candle lit? Is
Yes.
there?
The mood has to be right. No, I'm just kidding. But no, but seriously, that is a part of it. For this last project, I Want You, it was very, I read this book that was about this movie star that it goes through like the entirety of her life, and like she's not necessarily a good guy, but she's not really a bad guy either. She's got like all these motivations. It was really cool, but it was set in like old Hollywood, which was really cool. And that was kind of the inspiration for this character that the main character meets. That's this super famous movie star. And she's kind of have this like timeless kind of thing where she's in all these period pieces and everything like that. So I definitely had a specific genre of music playing. Like it was really like classical or like 50s, 60s style music that was always on in the background when I was writing this, because I wanted to have that kind of old timey, like old Hollywood feel, even though the first scene is this guy doing motion capture on a soundstage.
Sure.
It's kind of the meshing of those two worlds, just another way to kind of bring those two different, like very distinct, different type of people and clash them together. Yeah.
Yeah.
So music, yes. Candlelight, sometimes.
I mean, when you're writing the ending of your horror films, I assume it's in a dark room with just your computer screen lit up.
Usually it can be, but most of the time it's like the idea is in a dark room or like in the shower and like driving home on a rainy day or something like that. I'm like, oh, that's terrifying and terrible. I can't wait to write that down. And then I could write it down anywhere.
Sure. Yeah. You scribble it down in a note on your phone, or do you keep a notebook with you to scribble down ideas?
Not really. My partner Kendall is my notebook. I just like I just like, hey, I had this really cool idea. You want to hear it? And she's like, is it scary? I'm like, yeah. She's like you. She doesn't like the horror movies, but I get one a year that I get to watch with her. So I have to pick it very, very choice precision.
Oh yeah. So you slowly opening up the catalog.
Yes, one at a time. One per year.
One
and
a
that's I think
year.
all I'll get.
Yeah.
But I'll take it.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And then Joe, does filmmaking, well, we kind of talked about this. You said that it keeps you busy most of the time because you're doing it for your 9 to 5, although I assume filmmaking's not actually 9 to 5, and then on the side as well.
It's the weirdest 9 to 5 I've ever had, because sometimes it's 3:30 to 8 p.m. or like 3:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. or something like that. It just depends on the project, but it's awesome. I love it.
When you work that kind of long hours, do you then get like the next day off?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes it's like back to the edit room or something like that. Like we have a deadline, we have to hit it, and
Sure.
it's all fun though. I mean, I love it, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But yeah, I think that, so like I don't know if I may be assuming your question, but like sometimes I'll come home after a long day and I'll sit down and start writing or editing, and it's a little tough to like balance that with work and like personal life and stuff like that. Sometimes maybe it's at a fault.
Yeah.
But most of the time it's just fun to like
Yeah,
sit down and do a passion project.
And are you able to, does that feel like self-care for you? Or what are you able to do to take care of yourself and self-care in and around working full-time in the studio and full-time and doing more filmmaking on the side? Does that feel like self-care for you?
It definitely does. It's like it's kind of a revitalizing. Every once in a while, a project comes along that just kind of rejuvenates the love. Like you'll be just doing a million car commercials, like somebody on a green screen that's pushing their big deals at their lot, and you do that for weeks on end. And then like a friend will come up and be like, hey, I want to do this thing that's black and white and 4:3 aspect ratio and really dark and moody, and you're like, that's cool. I would love to do that. And that kind of like reinvigorates. So that's definitely a part of the self-care. On top of that, we have a dog and a cat that we love to go on adventures with, and
Dogs don't really let you don't let you get too stuck in your work.
Exactly right. Yeah, she'll like be pawing at the door and want to go out, and we take her on adventures, and we're in such a beautiful state, and we're exploring it as much as we can. So
living your best Colorado life.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Joe, let's take a real quick break here, and we'll be back in a moment.
And we're back. No, that's your
Yeah.
line.
And we're back. And we're back now with Joe Greening, filmmaker. Joe, real quick, where can people find you on the internet?
I think I'm most active on my Instagram, which is just Joe_Greening, I believe.
And no weird spelling on Joe and Greening.
Nope, it's just green, like the color, ING. And my website, too. It needs a revamp, but joegreening.com is also...
You've got a couple of your previous films or short film pieces up there to watch.
Yeah. Some of those projects are up there in full. And then Instagram is more just snippets and fun stuff. But that's the thing
Lots
I'm
of
most...
behind the scenes.
Exactly. A lot of behind the scenes and then still frames and stuff. But that's the one where I'm most active is Instagram.
Where do you end up when you make a project? Where does it end up? Is it streaming on Netflix? Where does it go?
Sometimes they just go right to YouTube because it's more of just like a fun project just to like get the juices going or something like that, or if it's like a proof of concept, just something that we can show to potential investors or something like that. If we have like, this is a short film that we could make into a feature film and this is like the general idea. Sometimes it's just up on YouTube. A lot of times there's an initial, like I personally try to put projects into film festivals, which is always it can or it can't.
I mean, it's kind of like juried shows or other events.
Mm-hmm.
You got to put it up to be judged and before it can be judged.
Exactly. And it's a good way for it to like, especially with horror. That one that I shot with that filmmaker Simeon Gregory in Washington, he wrote, it was his first film that he'd written. And it got into like all of the super awesome horror genre festivals across the nation. And then it got picked up by Screambox. And it's in an anthology thing that's streaming through. It's called Bloody Bites or something like that, and it's cool. Amazing. It's got distribution and it's a short film, which doesn't usually happen. And then one that I shot that Steve Warkle directed, Hair Trigger. That one was one that we shot in 2019, and
that was more of a feature length.
That was the feature.
90-minute.
Mm-hmm, yep. And that one, we got into a few film festivals, and because it's a feature, it's a little bit more appealing for distributors to kind of come after. So we had a few inquiries, and we went with one that is trying to get it out there and sold right now. But right now, they've personally put it up on like YouTube and to rent, and Amazon Prime to rent, and all those kind of like online distributors, and they're still shopping it out there, trying to get it picked up by some other streaming service or something like that. But it's, to answer the question in a really long form, that it can go in any direction depending on the project.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you will use any means of sharing it. Yeah,
definitely. It's most of the time it's a really fun and personal project that I would love to get people to see. That's the kind of the joy of it, is for people to see it and enjoy it hopefully as much as I do.
Right, and then if you can make some money, that doesn't hurt.
That does not hurt, no.
Yeah.
Yes.
For sure. Mm-hmm. I completely understand that, and I think that's where a lot of woodburners start. We start with making something for friends and family, and then someone says, oh, you should put it on Etsy. Is this for sale? And things grow from there.
Is that like the number one place that woodburning kind of, like, people are shopping for woodburning artwork?
You do find a lot of people shopping on Etsy, but it's... The nice thing about Etsy is they bring the audience.
Sure. So if somebody's just looking for something handcrafted.
They go to most people go to Etsy first. Right. The hard thing about Etsy is that they charge for every single listing. It's like 30 cents a listing or something.
Oh, gotcha.
And I don't have an Etsy, but yeah, and their fees seem to be going up just as often as everybody else's fees are going up. So. Yeah. Maybe I have outdated information too.
Right. So are a lot of woodburners like trying to find other means other than Etsy to sell their artwork?
Oftentimes people are trying to like get, you want your website to be your hub where people go.
Yeah.
And so people, if you can, people will go there. But
right.
It's hard you build your audience, and then to get your audience to decide that it's worth it to spend their money on your converting your audience. Each of those steps, you can have an audience, and then you can convert 10% maybe, right. 1%, whatever the numbers are.
Right. And I'm sure it's hard to be a household name It's hard to be a household name in any type of field, let alone wood burning, I'm sure, right? So
Yeah.
your personal website might be a little harder to get traffic.
Right, which
Yeah.
is why you'll see a lot of people on Instagram or on Etsy. And then,
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, let's go back to you a little bit more. What are good days and what are bad days looking like for you as a creator?
Good question. I think good days have a lot of inspiration and a lot of variety, and bad days are just fine. They're like, if there's not, if you're on a job and you're filming or gripping or you're just doing lighting or something like that, you need to just do it. Whether or not it's a good day or a bad day, you're there to do the job, and you better get inspired, or you're just going to look like everybody else's project.
Sure.
And when it comes more to like writing or editing or something like that, if it's a bad day or an uninspired day, then it's time to put it down and go do something else fun. Watch a movie or go for a walk or go for a drive or go out to eat or something like that.
Yeah, take a break.
Yeah.
Give your tools a rest.
Exactly.
And your tools can be your brain, your hands, your
Yeah, exactly.
everything
exactly.
else.
So that I don't think that I would ever write something if I was having like a bad writing day or something like that. It's pretty easy for me to just put that down and wait for the inspiration.
You don't need to force it.
Yeah. But that's why it's good to have an ending, because then if I put it down and I'm not feeling inspired, I might never be inspired again. So
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a bunch of endings sitting on the shelf?
I don't actually. That's the hardest part for me is endings. So I actually have one kind of full length feature that I'm writing right now, and I made sure to do a full outline with the ending before I even started on page 1. So
Sure. Yeah.
So just one as of right now.
Just one right
ending.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to see that one.
That's also scary. You probably won't.
I might, for you, I might watch that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. How much of your time, like, what's your breakdown of time kind of look like? Do you spend 90% of your time creating in some form? How much time do you spend on social media marketing, finding inspiration, not doing creative things?
Yeah.
I mean, you can get inspiration from your but
I get what you're saying. It's hard to, and because of that, it's hard to put an actual like percentage number on it.
Well, and we don't have to do math.
Right. Exactly. I think that multiple times a day, if I'm not at work doing work that's involved with that whole process, I'm either thinking about a project or trying to come up with a new angle of something I'm writing or working on or editing or trying to learn a new skill, whether that's editing or coloring with the way that you edit or something like that. So I would say it's every day. But there's always time for, hanging out with loved ones and going and relaxing and doing all the other stuff that life has to offer.
For sure.
But it is pretty, it's definitely a passion. There's a reason that I've been thinking about it since second grade and just kept growing the want to do it. So, it's a pretty consistent feeling of feeling inspired and wanting to create and stuff like that and share it.
Yeah. Amazing. All right. Well, Joe, it's time to play our favorite game here on Peak Pyrography.
I didn't bring my running shorts, but I'm ready for the game.
All right. Yeah. It's not, you don't have to move.
Okay, good.
That's a deserted island. We're going to put you on a deserted island as a writer, director, filmmaker, and we're going to limit what you have with you.
Okay.
So you get to take one writing program, software, one way to write.
Okay.
Like one camera, one lens, and then one other item for filmmaking.
That's exciting.
This is all you get to take, and you're going to make your movie with it.
Okay. Do I get actors?
Sure.
Okay. That doesn't count, right?
That doesn't count as your extra.
Okay. Gotcha.
You're not by yourself, but it's a
Sure, it's like
relatively
the
deserted.
tools. The tools.
Yes.
Gotcha. Well, when it comes to writing, I've really I'm like I said, like I've been kind of out of the game of the writing and directing, so I've really only used one program, and I've loved it. It's called Arc Studio. that you can make outlines, you can work on as many projects as you want, and kind of come and there's a bunch of different tools for the whole. It's not just a script writing software. You can craft the whole story. So I really like that one, but that's the only one I've used. So that would be my writing software. Although there's a lot to be said for the notepad and pen. Yeah, exactly. For a camera, I am really partial to Red brand cinema cameras. The one that I use at work a lot is the Red V Raptor, which is just, a really big cinema camera that shoots in 6K and it shoots raw video files. So it's got a lot of power behind it. And I've always loved Red's color science. That's like my favorite thing about it is when you're coloring the images, it's always beautiful, and it's not that hard to make it look beautiful when it comes to the coloring. For lenses, I would have to probably say a 35 millimeter lens would be my absolute favorite.
I've heard good things about that kind of
Yeah,
lens.
everyone loves the 50, the nifty 50, but I like a little bit wider, and I think it's a little bit more versatile. So I'd probably say that. And then, oh gosh, just one other thing.
Go to the graveyard and shoot with your best friend.
Okay. If we're on a desert island, we're probably shooting outdoors. So I will do a little bit of a cheat and do one of those 5-in-1 foldable reflector things, because you can reflect light with it, you can diffuse light with it, you can block light with it, you can do a lot with just that little tiny tool.
Perfect.
So that'd probably be what I would use.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And after we play Deserted Island, I like to have a moment here where we do some shout outs and some community building. And who are 3 accounts that you think everybody should be following because you'll get something out of them? And it doesn't have to obviously be wood burners, but who would any creative benefit from learning something from?
Peak Pyrography.
Peak Pyro Podcast?
Yes. That's a tough one. I think for me, I'll just go with like my personal inspirations and stuff like that. And as someone who is really, really into the horror genre and everything like that, I feel inspired every single time I see a Mike Flanagan production. And he's a filmmaker that he does horror, but he's done like movies and shows, and he always crafts a story in a way that it involves like really in-depth and elaborate characters, and then puts them in really traumatic situations. But it's less so about, the horror, it makes the horror stronger, in my opinion, when you've got characters that you're so invested in. And there's like so much drama and heart in his stories. Every single one that I've watched has that same kind of theme throughout. So I feel super inspired when I see his work. And then someone that I'm going like for the big shots, so just get ready. But I think someone that's inspired Mike Flanagan is Stephen King, who is like a world-renowned horror writer, and I've recently inherited a bunch of my dad's paperbacks from like the 80s of
the old dog-eared copies that
exactly
have been well loved.
Yeah, oh yes, they're like falling apart and dirty, and it's pretty cool to read those original paperbacks, like with the cool artwork on the cover and everything like that. But also another writer, storyteller that does that same thing, which I find really interesting and super compelling, where you're following more of the character. You're less concerned about the boogeyman. You're more concerned about how these really, really believable characters are responding to the boogeyman, which I think is like the most compelling part of storytelling.
Absolutely.
The other one I'd probably just say like a general of like I feel inspired like with every single one of my friends like accounts. Like I said, I have a lot of filmmaker friends that are posting things, and we've kind of got this big circle of inspiration where somebody will create something and put something out there, and it's really awesome to like, you can get inspired like from like somebody's photograph or somebody's poem or somebody's song that they wrote.
The inspiration's out there, so go find those people.
Exactly. So I would say like your friends, I guess, is like if I was going to answer the question like how you asked it, but that's the sneaky way.
Do you want to shout out any of them specifically?
Yeah, of course. Like Derek Bauer, Nick Beaver, Lyndon Stave, Stephen Warkle, Simon Gregory, I feel so bad because I'm going to leave people out.
I know, and that's the hardest part about this question. Every time I ask it, it's never intended that you're leaving somebody out.
Yeah.
It's never the idea that, there are so many different people out there. And it's just, for me and for people, for listeners, it's really cool to hear who's inspiring you in this moment. And that doesn't mean that someone's not going to come around tomorrow and it be it who you're like, oh, can I change my answer?
Yeah, exactly.
There's no offense intended here and none taken.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
And every time I ask the question, I feel bad for making you choose. Yeah. Well, great. And then creatively, what is one tip or trick that you use often that you think other people can use?
I think that a lot of filmmakers would probably benefit to know, especially ones that are just starting out, to use what's at your disposal. Is kind of like, I think, the biggest thing.
Yeah, I mean, if it's just your camcorder, or
right,
the best tools are the ones you have with you.
Exactly. And I think that, like, especially in film school, like myself and other friends and other classmates, we'd want to make the next Christopher Nolan movie. And you can't really do that when you're a poor, broke college student. You don't have the budget, you don't have the equipment or the people. And a lot of times those projects that we're shooting for, like, beyond the moon, fell a little bit short because it's just stuff that you can't complete on a shoestring budget. So I think the best advice that I ever got was, like, shoot with what you have and use what's at your disposal. Like, for that movie that I just shot, I work at a film production studio, so I utilized the giant white cyc wall that we have in the green room.
You can use this from 9 p.m. till 3 a.m.
Exactly, yes. After everyone's out of here and we don't have to deal with you, yes, come on in and do it. And I think that kind of stuff is invaluable. And everybody's got those connections, whether or not you realize it. You've got, like, a friend whose dad works at, a store that you could use after hours or something like that. And I think it's just always using what's in front of you.
And if you don't, you slide into someone's DMs
Exactly.
and say, hey, you want to come on my podcast?
Right, exactly. And the worst you can get is a no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if it's a no, it's usually not even a no. Sometimes it's not now.
Oh yeah, yes. Eventually, maybe.
Yeah.
But it does break my heart when I get a no. So that is the worst thing that could happen for me. But
understood.
yeah, it's easy to get over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Joe, what are the big things you've got coming up? I Want You, and whenever that comes out.
That's the big thing. That was, like, I love doing cinematography and working behind the camera, but I think my passion is working with actors. So I'm going to continue to try to kind of go in that direction. Like I said, I'm writing a bigger project, so the hope is to, get I Want You out there, and then use that to get some eyes on this feature script and see if we can't get some funding for that. So that's the hope of the future. But other than that, it's just keeping and creating every day.
Is the long term to continue to do your own work, or is it to get a directing job on a big Hollywood film? Like,
I think it's just to continue to do things that I find really interesting and can feel inspired to do. I think that, the Hollywood is super appealing, but also I've heard so many things about, like, that's just churning out things that, and that's not to say I wouldn't
lose the passion.
Exactly. That's not to say I wouldn't do it. That would be amazing. That would be awesome. Yeah. But in the meantime, it's super, super fun to just do all this fun stuff with friends and other filmmakers that get it and feel that same type of inspiration.
Cool. Yeah. Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming on today. This has been a blast having you here in studio, and it's been great talking to you about your process. Yeah,
thank you so much for having me, Justine. I'm excited to hear it when it comes out.
Yeah.
Next week.
Yeah, next week, or maybe closer to when I Want You comes out.
Oh,
we'll see.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks so much.
Great, thank you. Peak Pyrography is produced by Fedde Studios and Justine Fedde. Our producer and sound engineer is Kevin Fedde. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. You can share comments on today's podcast or suggestions for the future on Instagram at Peak Pyro Podcast or via email at peakpyrography@gmail.com. That's peakpyrography@gmail.com. Until next time, keep creating. I can't wait to see what you make next.